Bonjour, bienvenue sur le site de l'Université populaire que le Théâtre 14 met en place depuis une saison à présent. L'occasion de rencontrer des auteurs et des autrices, le moyen d'appréhender le monde différemment que la seule diffusion des spectacles. Et aujourd'hui, nous avons l'honneur de rencontrer Tim Crouch à l'occasion de l'accueil du spectacle de Moi Malvolio que vous avez écrit. Et la rencontre sera animée par Catherine Hargreaves qui a mis en scène le spectacle et qui a été joué du 12 au 23 octobre au Théâtre 14.
Hello again.
Hi.
Hi. So, Tim Crouch, you are an author, a performer, an actor, a director. You started writing in 2003, a play called My Arm that you performed yourself, and then you wrote other plays that you performed in also, and now you've been writing ever since, huh? Never stopped.
Yeah.
You're an award-winning playwright. Your plays have been played, I think, in several countries. Translated
many.
in different languages. And you also studied a lot in universities because of the different forms you do in your plays.
Yeah.
So
True. There is a line in one of my plays called The Author, where there is a character called Tim Crouch, and he describes himself as the darling of the universities.
Okay.
And there is a satire in that line, but it was written quite a long time ago, that play. But I was interested in thinking of a playwright who was studied in such a sort of detached, rarefied environment. Yes.
Well, that's interesting because that's something we often have in your plays where you actually say before what's going to happen and then it happens.
True. Well, there we go, and then that did happen.
Yeah, so that happened for real. There's a lot of things to say about your plays. What struck me first, I think, is the fact that you actually make visible the invisible machinery of what happens in between the audience and the stage.
Yeah.
And that you always, when we see one of your plays, we're always reminded that we're actually participating in something that's happening in the present moment. We'll come back to your plays and talk about them, but there's also a lot of your presence on the web. If you type Tim Crouch, you find out there's lots of videos that you've done, or talks, and there's also a lot of people, even kids, who write on blogs about your work or workshops they've done with you. And we've come out of quite a difficult period full of lockdowns. There's been, 3 lockdowns, I think, in France. I don't know how many.
And the same in the UK.
The same in the UK. And I was struck by a video that you did during the lockdown saying, when all this is over, remember to stay strange.
Yes.
So now that things seem to be starting again, have you managed to stay strange? And probably you could remind us what you were saying, why you think we should stay strange.
So in that, it was a provocation. I was invited to give a provocation for an event called Caravan in Brighton, where I live. And it was at a time in May 2020 where Brighton and the world was in a very strange place in that there were no aeroplanes in the sky, there was very little traffic, there were very few people in the streets. The bird song was much louder and more present, and nature felt more present. And I think in that talk I envisaged this as some large Brechtian gesture of alienation, to keep oneself alienated. Because the danger, of course, is if one loses that distance, one loses one's critical presence in the world. And so I think strangeness was around that idea, to keep critically present, to understand that the danger for us all is to get into habitual patterns and to try and break patterns, to keep patterns broken. I think if you get into a pattern, then you stop thinking. So it was around that. That's what I think I was talking about. And have I continued to stay strange? Well, I think the world is still enabling me to consider it as strange. And not just because of COVID, but also because of Brexit that's happened in the last year, because I'm seeing borders now where borders didn't used to exist. And I think borders are appearing more and more in people's heads that didn't used to exist or existed on a more subliminal level. So, yeah, that's forcing us all, I think, to reappraise how we live our lives. To come here to Paris, I had to travel on the Eurostar, and for the first time the announcement was, as the UK is no longer a member of the European Union, which upset me and depressed me quite intensely on the train coming over. And then going through the tunnel and out into France, I was aware that it was all very different to how it was the last time I was here. Mm-hmm. So yes, well, one would hope that I keep challenging and questioning myself, and challenging and questioning what becomes the norm. So the norm never resides and settles. It's constantly interrogated. That sounds really effortful and difficult, but I think as an artist it's something one should do. I think one should always approach a piece of work or making a new work almost from a tabula rasa, you know, from the beginning, every time from the beginning, and don't rely upon previous forms because the forms have changed.
Okay. And you also said in another video that there was this idea of a fallow year. Did you say fallow year?
Fallow year.
And the fact that now everything has started again, how do you feel about it? What's it like for you, and what's it like for theatre in England?
You've been watching a lot of my videos.
Well, no, it's just it's
there, it's out there.
Today.
Yeah, it is. That was an interesting video where I was talking about the Edinburgh Fringe and how the intensive farming methods of creating work that are so present in the Edinburgh Fringe might not be the healthiest way of creating work. And so the idea that in farming there is an opportunity sometimes, although less so now, to just let the earth rest for a bit. So we've had that opportunity given to us. We've had no choice in it. And what do I know? Well, I've seen some work since work has started to come back, and some work I feel has recognized the profound transformation in the world, and some work has not at all. I mean, some work was programmed before COVID, and then to honor that programming decision, they've just brought the work back. And I totally understand it, because there are writers and artists who were relying on that work, but I feel like there needs to be what's the farming analogy? We need to cut the crop. We need to cut the crop, you know, and some crop will die because of that, because the land is different, the terrain is different, the chemical structure of the earth is different. So I'm trying to think about new work, and of course now I'm thinking about new work. I can't not think about it in relation to what's happened in the last year and a half. And I find it very strange when I see work that hasn't some reference to the last year and a half.
Yeah, it pretends that it hasn't happened.
Yeah, because it has. And I know it will be a slow process, and I don't think I want to see plays about COVID, but I do want to see plays that address the sort of formal transformation that's happened about how we live and how we are. And you know, to go out into the Paris metro and to see everyone wearing masks, to go into the UK underground, which I was in yesterday, nobody was wearing masks. So something profound is happening, not just on the surface, but also underneath. Work that references or feeds off that alteration feels really important.
Okay. So let's come back to your plays now.
Okay.
And so that takes us, for me, to 2012, when I discovered your plays for the first time.
Yeah.
I just staged a play that was based on the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, and the audience, part of the audience, was furious. And that really put me in an awkward feeling, an awkward moment. I was like, probably I didn't do the right thing. What I was trying to do is trying to tell the audience, if we want beauty to exist in the present moment, we have to do it together. And that made them furious, some of them.
Okay,
it was like, we paid, it's for you to work and to show us beauty. And I was trying to find something else. So I left, after this play, I was like, probably I went on the wrong path. And then I read your play, The Author, I read A Note Tree. Mm-hmm. And I said, wow, this guy knows how to create with the audience something, knows how to underline, let's say, the power of the imagination and how it's really important for the construction of a play. And he also knows what is the responsibility of watching a play, what it means, how you get engaged, how you involve in a play that's unfolding in front of you. So is that right? Do you agree with that? And is that what you try to do in your plays?
Well, both those plays are playing to some degree on surface reality, I suppose.
Yeah.
The surface reality that I think sometimes is quite fixed in a traditional dramatic understanding. This is the scene, this is where the play happens, it happens here, this is the set, these are the demarcations of the fiction. And I think in those plays, and probably in all the work, I'm trying to loosen that. So the plane of reality in the author and in an oak tree exists as much in the audience's head as it does on the stage, more in the audience's head. And that then is giving an audience a more active relationship, because they are to some degree co-authoring the work. Because if we're moving the plane of reality into the audience's head, then they are generating the images as much as the stage. And I think I'm interested in operating in that place where I trigger images in an audience's head more than I demonstrate images on stage. I've often said, to show a picture, there's no negotiation. This is what we're working with. This is the image. This is the figurative image. And I try and remove the figurative image and allow a subjective image to be generated in each audience member's mind. The author absolutely does that because there's no physical action. I mean, it feels a very physical piece of theatre because the audience is the set and is the location of the play. The play is set in an audience. I mean, theoretically, it's also set in a theatre, but you're in a theatre anyway. And you're set in a theatre that claims to be another theatre other than the theatre that you're in. It's set in the Royal Court Theatre, even when it's performed elsewhere, is the stage direction. So I think on one... And an oak tree, just to tie those two plays up, an oak tree proposes the presence of a character, but ideally, the character is contained within an actor who doesn't look anything like the character. There's a very simple physical description of that character, and I am most happy when an actor who doesn't know the play, who is invited on stage and is guided through that play, I'm most happy in a way when that actor looks nothing like the character they're described to be. So again, the plane of reality is taken away, the responsibility is taken away from the performer or the stage and into the audience.
In an oak tree, you have a woman playing a man and describing the fact that...
a 46-year-old man with, wearing grubby clothes and unshaven and shaking and a bloodshot eye, which I think always is this unperformable action. You can't act a bloodshot eye. It's an impossibility. Don't even try to represent this physically. And also, you don't need to, because the audience will be doing that job for you. So yes, an invitation for the audience to work with us is not to everyone's piece. It's not to everyone's liking, I suppose. Partly because we have been, in the last however many decades, we've been encouraged to understand our role as an audience as a more passive spectator. This distinction in English between an audience and a spectator. An audience is about listening. I invite an audience to listen. And I'm also aware that listening is a very present moment act. If you are genuinely listening, you can only be in the present moment. You're not thinking about what's happened before or what's coming in the future. You are there. And I request, I invite an audience to listen. And if you don't listen in my work, then you won't see the pictures that I'm offering that you can see. So spectatorship is different. Spectatorship works off the visuals. And there is a great pleasure in the visuals. But I think in my work, I want to place the visuals and the audio in kind of opposition to each other. Or crudely, what I say is what the eye sees and what the ear sees. So I want the eye to see one thing and what the ear sees to contradict what the eye sees. So in an oak tree, there's a woman performing the part of a 6'2", 46-year-old man. And the ear has seen that because that's the language, but the eye sees something else. a play of mine called Adler and Gibb pushes this to an extreme where props, the reality of props is undermined regularly and playfully. So we know that this object isn't what we see, it is something else.
That's quite magic, because you have that in the present moment, but there's also in your plays the shifting of the understanding, where in fact you think you've seen something, you think you've understood something, and in I Malvolio you think you've seen a loser at the beginning, and at the end you see a Puritan, and it changes, and you think, oh, he's not the guy I thought he was. And in all the plays there's this sort of, and each time it's very moving, in fact, to realize that what you've understood or what you felt, well, you can feel it differently, like in the 3 scenes later. And
so yeah, important for that transformation to happen before our eyes. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Not for there to be, I don't know, there is obviously a rehearsal process, a preparation process, but I think the actual action of transformation isn't a thing that happens in the wings, at the side of the stage, before the show, is a thing that happens in real time, in front, with the audience contributing. So in an oak tree, the transformation of this, if it's a female performer into this male, hasn't happened somewhere else. It happens there. And you said at the beginning it's about showing the mechanics. I mean, yeah, that's what is meant by the mechanics, I suppose. I think often a lot of processes in a more traditional approach to theatre require the transformation to have happened figuratively, through makeup, costumes, characterization. And I think I want to challenge all that stuff. If characterization, makeup and costume happens, I want it to happen kind of on stage. So Malvolio transforms in front of your eyes, yeah. There is a little table with a wash bowl and makeup and the costume rail, and it's not happening in the dressing room, it's happening here.
And do you want, I mean, you invite them to sort of see the transformation, use the power of the imagination, but I have the feeling that also when you write your plays, you want the audience to be aware of what they're doing in the present moment. Is that right or not?
Yeah.
Or is
it would be crude to say that I usually give an audience an idea of a character. I mean, they have a sort of active relationship to narrative. So in an oak tree, there are 2 audiences. There's an audience who is, the action of an oak tree is a stage hypnotist act that takes place a year in the future. And so there is an audience out there who are watching a stage hypnotist act a year in the future, and there is the audience who is watching a show called An Oak Tree. And at one point, the audience who are watching the stage hypnotist act leaves. So there's now only one audience. So I'm just separating, in a way, these dual identities that always exist. They exist on stage because there's the actor and there's the character they play. And I don't want to, I want to keep the division visible between those 2 things. In the author, yes, the audience is an audience in the Royal Court Theatre and in the play. And in the play, the author, in whatever space they might be in. I think there's a nice interplay there. In Adler and Gibb, the audience is a group of academics listening to a talk given by a student about the life of 2 artists. In the most recent play, Terrestrial Salvation, this play with a long title, Total, Immediate, Collective, Imminent Terrestrial Salvation, the audience is both an audience in the theatre and members of a cult in South America. So on one level, it's playful. On another level, I'm asking the audience to help support the narrative. So they are not divorced from it. There is bleeding happening between the stage and the audience, not just physically. In Malvolio, audience members come up. That's quite rare for me in my work. But it's on a kind of conceptual level. There is a bleed taking place.
And it just shows us that you can, in fact, use your brain, think and feel at the same time. You don't have to separate them.
Yeah, I said, I think emotion is the most effective mode of transport for an idea.
Exactly.
Particularly in theatre, you know, if you want, otherwise it becomes a dry and academic and ideological, and you might as well, if you want to write a pamphlet, write a pamphlet. We've just been teaching this, about the idea of, you know, plays that are very clear on their thesis, have a very strong point they want to get across. And I think that's just not theatre's role. That's a kind of journalistic role.
Not here to send out messages.
Yeah. I mean, there are messages that are being sent, but they are much more subliminal, internal, interior. They are about as much about how as about what. So how a story is told, which for me is about how the form is made that transports this story. So in a notary, the form of an actor who doesn't know the play is equally as important as the story of that play. And I think that form touches an audience more deeply, in a way, than the story of that play. And if you can get the two things combining, talking to each other and supporting each other, not in a kind of experimental for experimental sake. That's never my... I am described at times as an experimental theatre maker. And I what do I feel? I feel like every theatre maker should be an experimental theatre maker, because you've done work and you're now trying new work. And the search for new expression should just be at the benchmark of all theatre makers or artists.
Yeah, all theatre should be experimental.
Of course it should, yeah.
And youth theatre also.
Probably more so than ever,
Mm.
I mean, the danger with young people is that they bring so much conditioning, you know, and so there's an opportunity when you're working with young people to really shake that out of them and go, look, the future is yours. Start from you. What do you want to see, you know? Yeah. What new do you want to see?
You try to challenge them in your plays for
young people, I suppose I do, yeah.
And do you think that's the reason why, for example, I Malvolio, you wrote it for what, 11-year-olds at the beginning? And now adults come and see it.
Well,
and
the sad thing in a way is that it's been colonized by adults, I Malvolio. It is in a way at its strongest when there is a group of young people who are in a relationship with an authority figure who disciplines them, who controls them, who challenges them, who shouts at them, who is angry with them, who disagrees with their behaviours. Because this is the foundation of the character of Toby Belch and Malvolio in Twelfth Night. And it's also an opportunity for an audience to start to challenge the authority of the stage. It's not by accident that an audience member kicks Malvolio. It's not by accident that an attempt is made to kill the performer. And then an invitation to kind of take over at the end. There is this, I think, very exciting openness at the end of I Malvolio, where the stage is empty, and I think the offer for the agency to leave the actor and to go into the audience. And I would hope that's kind of picked up on an immediate level, but also on a longer term understanding.
I was also wondering, the first play you wrote, you acted.
Yeah.
So you wrote for yourself.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. I would like to think it's not because I wanted to... It was an egotistical thing. I was an actor, so in my kind of 30s, in my 20s I was a member of a collective and we devised work, created work, co-created. It was very creative and very fulfilling. And then I went to drama school. And in my 30s, I was waiting for the phone to ring and became more and more frustrated in that experience and was on the verge of leaving theatre, really, because it wasn't giving me the satisfaction that I had had in my earlier years. And then the decision to write wasn't really a decision, it was an attempt to write. And the writing required a new approach to performance. That was kind of inspired by my frustrations. I think, Catherine, all the work still responds to the difficulty I had being an actor in the industry, as it's called. Because I lost any sense of creativity, I lost any sense of an audience in that relationship, and so the work then was an attempt to, instead of just complain about being a sad actor, to actually an attempt to contribute to the argument. So it felt absolutely natural that I should place myself into the argument as a performer. And so over the last nearly 20 years now, since I've been making my work, thoughts around performance are central. And rather than as a director only or a writer and director only, bringing actors in and going, no, it's not that, it's this. I think it's not this, it's that. To actually try and embody for myself an understanding of what I mean. I then find myself in really interesting conversations when we do bring actors into the work, and some plays I'm not in at all. because there is always this conversation about, what are you looking for, Tim? What do you want here? You know, are you want me to act or not? And I go, yeah, I definitely do want you to act, but I maybe don't want you to act like that acting. Yeah. There is a possibility of thinking, I don't think I'm a revolutionary, but thinking differently about what a performer is. And it is connected about being open to an audience, about not necessarily completing the act or completing the action, but allowing an audience to be involved in that. Very different sort of levels of understanding. And I felt like at the beginning, I had to be in the middle of that. I couldn't stand on the outside of it.
Well, listening to you, I feel that what you ask from the actors, you ask from the audience also.
Yes, okay, yes.
Yeah.
I don't want you to own audience or own the actor. I don't want you to own your role or own your role as an actor, because that ownership is dull. It kind of closes something. So there is a sharing. There is a sharing of the boundaries, going back to Brexit again. Let's release those boundaries. Let's open those boundaries. So there are performative actions happening in an audience, and there are performative actions happening on stage. Maybe there is on the scales, it's happening more here than it is there. But I usually have the lights on in my work. They are usually present. Yeah, there is a performative action to the audience. Of course there is. There is a performative action to their presence. Just their being there is, to some degree, like I said in Malvolio, there's a character in the room. And to ignore the character in the room just feels like you're acting against a wall. You know, you're acting up against a wall. So to put that wall, well, the fourth wall is that thing. For me, the fourth wall is the back of the auditorium. Yeah. It's not here.
No, it's not there.
It's not there. We are all in the same space. And the presence of 150 human beings must bleed into the action on the stage.
And it can't be the same each evening.
No, it can't, because there will be 150 different human beings the next night. So come on, try and think, prize open this relationship so there can be an influence. With an oak tree, there is an actor who doesn't know the play, and that's an audience member, theoretically. Not theoretically. That's they are the audience, they are representatives from the audience, because they are in the same state of discovery as the audience, as the play proceeds. And that, for me, is very much about liberating an audience into seeing themselves on stage.
And was it easy to make it work? I mean, when you did My Arm and wanted to write and you wrote for yourself, was it easy to sort of convince people and to find the audience at the time? Did it happen easily?
I think to some degree, My Arm got taken up. You know, to some degree, it got invited to go to Edinburgh, to a good theatre, like a curated theatre in Edinburgh, the Travis Theatre. Most of Edinburgh Fringe is not curated; it's just like a free-for-all. Yeah. But the Travis has a season every year, and I think My Arm was taken and invited by the Travis, not because of the formal experimentation that might have been perceived in that play, but because that play was about a boy who puts his arm above his head and never takes it down. And it's like, oh, wow, that's... I'm attracted by the narrative. I want to know what happens. What's the plot there? What's coming? You know, what happens to this kid? And always the story has been kind of fundamental. An oak tree then gets... so much of the focus on an oak tree is about an actor who doesn't know the play. It's great, that's a focus, but for me, almost the most important thing, the story is about two men meeting 3 months after the death of a child, and one of those men is the father of that child who has transformed a tree next to where she died into his daughter. And it's like, I want to know that, I want to go to that, will you please tell me that story? You know, I think we go where the stories are, first and foremost. And if I made work that didn't have that narrative hook, I think some academics would probably come and see my work and go, very interesting. Is this post-dramatic? In what pigeonhole can I put this? But if I say this is a story about a man who's turned his daughter into a tree, I hope that's a hook for anyone and everyone.
Yeah, that's all your plays have. The story is really important, but you also have in each play a different form that you've invented. to be in relationship with the audience. So what comes first when you write? Is it the story? Is it the form? Is it both at the same time? Is it the story that leads you to the form?
It's different every time, and it's always a negotiation. With the author, I wanted to place an audience into their own space. I wanted them to be the location. An oak tree, first and foremost, it was a theme of hypnosis and loss, and then it became the story, and then it was also about an artwork called An Oak Tree that I wanted to respond to, and the form came quite late in the day, and was only supported in our development of the play because I felt strongly it increased the potential of the story. And then a play like Adler and Gibb took forever, and there was like a little dance between form and content. Adler and Gibb begins abstract and ends in a film. So it's about a form that's sort of striving for authenticity, and the story of the play is about an actress who is striving for authenticity in her role in a film. So it took years to kind of slowly feel confident enough to know that this feels like the next gear for the form, and then this triggers thoughts around the narrative, which then triggered another gear for the form, and slowly I hope to find a balance between the two. Terrestrial Salvation, I wanted to write a play where the audience read.
Yeah, I remember you when you came.
Maybe when I came the first time to Lyon.
That's what I want to do.
So that became that. But it is not. I mean, it should be. And also, interestingly, Terrestrial Salvation is about the creation of worlds. And I feel strongly about writing a play. You are creating a world, or you are creating a universe that has different physical laws, maybe to the world that we live in, where different things, I wrote a piece about Terrestrial Salvation saying, in plays we can time travel, we can go back and forwards, we can move things, things can go backwards. So you find the rules of the universe. And so to write a universe from scratch takes a long time. I could just do a 3-act play and write a play like, those. I know the rules of that universe because those are the dominant rules of the theatre universe. Of course, within that, you have to find the sub-clauses of that universe. But if you're going to find a form that supports your story, then you have to go from scratch every time. I say that, to start a new play is like to go back to nothing. I know nothing. I am an idiot. What is theatre? What can we do in this empty space? Oh my God, I have to go right back to the beginning.
That's your thing of not taking anything for granted.
I suppose so, yeah.
Like rediscovering all the time.
Yeah, tabula rasa. It's like start again. And if a story starts to form in this empty space, then the form in the empty space will come along with it. And if the form starts in the empty space, then the story. So Adler and Gibb took maybe 5 years to develop. It's not that I spend the whole of my 5 years just thinking about Adler and Gibb, but the work that I'm touring will feed into those thoughts. The books that I'm reading will feed into those thoughts. A day spent writing will feed into those thoughts. It's a slow process. My arm wrote very quickly because there was no previous play. But every play since my arm has taken a lot longer.
But that leads me to this question, which is, what influence has your latest play on the play you're creating? I mean, is it like you want to change completely the universe that you've created and do something completely different, or are the seeds in the play?
Of course. So when we say tabula rasa, it's like crazy. Don't be stupid. It's not possible because I have now a whole body of work behind me. Which obviously in some way colours, forms, informs is the word, informs the empty space, the beginning of a project. And so, to some degree, every play moves in response to the previous, or the previous, all of them. And the thing I'm working on at the moment is absolutely a continuation of the project. But still, I hope I'm not then being disingenuous when I say I try and clear the space.
No, I don't think they're both are.
I can't,
you
obviously.
Do both at the same time.
But I obviously can't start from nothing.
Yeah, but it's, okay. Okay.
And I'm in the world, you know, so there is no such, you know...
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't
Nothing
exist. An
doesn't
empty
exist.
space doesn't exist.
But I was just wondering, it's like if you wanted to sometimes do something, you write a play and you think, well, now the next play I want to do the complete reverse of what I've just done. Or does that happen?
Yeah, not the complete reverse, but absolutely something will be provoked by a play that I will get hooked on, but I know this is not the play to develop that idea. So you know, this is more conscious than I ever am, but I maybe save it for the next thing, possibly. And in conversations around the work, conversations in rehearsal, new things, usually a new idea starts to form out of the work of the previous thing.
And you need to talk with other artists when you're writing, or do you like, it's just something about locking yourself in your room and writing, or do you...
I would be scared to exclusively lock myself in my room. Although my arm was absolutely locked in my room with no, you know, correspondence with anyone, conversation with anyone, and got written and then basically went to stage just how it had been written. I am in a process now of beginning a new solo piece, and just this week as we talk, I had a conversation with 2 collaborators about the ideas for this new piece and where they are, and an understanding that a form is now pretty strong in my mind. And these are 2 collaborators who've worked with me since 2003. I mean, I have a longevity with that relationship. 2 men, Andy Smith and Carl James. Carl James is not in theatre, but is just a great provoker of thought for me. And also, of course, knows all my work. Like, these 2 men know my work better than anyone. And there is a shared language around my work. So when I say I'm thinking about this, it's beautiful. They will go, it reminds me of this, or this, or this. And that's really supportive. I don't think they'd ever go, no, Tim, this is terrible. What are you doing? And I kind of don't want them to do that. I don't want them to do that. But I don't open my work out to a committee. I don't go, this is the new idea, what do you think? I'm not forced entertainment in that I don't go in the room, let's all knock some ideas around and see what comes. I think I did that in my 20s, and I'm interested in not doing that now. I'm interested in a singular...
Why?
I'm interested in a singular vision, is that right? I say that just to see if I believe in what I'm saying.
That's interesting you're saying that, because... At the same time, you don't want to show. You're not demonstrating something.
No. But a singular vision is maybe the wrong word. But I think I go to the theatre, or I go to an art show. Yeah, let's think about an art. Let's think about the visual art connection. And a lot of my early work was very much connected to visual art. But I go to see the work of an artist. And in the same way that I might feel shortchanged if I understand that this artist develops some ideas and then let their studio work on them, because I go, well, I want the purity of a connection between one person and me. Does that sound very...
No,
Anyway, I don't know, individualistic. I find it...
Well, that's what I think when you're an audience, that's what you want also. You want this special relationship with what's going on stage. So you need to be 2.
Yes, so in the same way that you wouldn't with a visual artist, you know, expect a visual artist to have to open up their process. I do open up my process, I absolutely do. But the main opening of my process happens with an audience. That's where, and that's kind of, that should be the main opening. I mean, I say it glibly, but Malvolio never really rehearsed other than an attempt to work through costume. But then I've performed him so many times, and each time is a rehearsal. Each time is a rehearsal and discovery. And each time is different. And the danger is if you rehearse too much, then you fix too much. So I'm intrigued to know what this new solo... Now, I haven't written a solo for nearly 10 years. And usually with solo, with me performing it, all the I Shakespeares, the Peas Blossom, Caliban, Banquo, but never rehearsed. They don't have a director attached to them. They were written, and as they were written, they were conceived, they were learnt, and then they were presented, opened to an audience. And so now with this new piece, I'm aware that I could probably take this piece to an audience without much involvement from other people. But I feel like I'm in a luxurious situation where now I think the ideas are interesting me enough to test them against other people and to bring feedback in. But to take it easy. Having been a collaborative theatre maker in my 20s, I'm aware that sometimes a purity, it sounds very fascistic, but often with devising, the loudest voice wins. And the loudest voice might not be the best voice for the project. And also there can be a kind of flattening to a corporate style, because a lot of energy in a group goes to the group.
Yeah.
And a lot of energy when I'm working on my own goes to the work.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying this is right, this is better, and this is worse. It's just where I am in my process at the moment. I think I hit ideas, they take a lot longer, but the ideas that I hit are I think, kind of more authentic, or I use this word pure, but it conjures up horrible ideas of purity. I don't...
That's because
Yeah.
probably you've seen a Puritan yesterday evening.
Oh my God, maybe that's it. Yeah.
So, somebody told me, or was it you, that named sometimes I. Malvoyeux one Puritan show? Have you heard that?
No, that what? He's...
Like, not a one-man show, but a one Puritan.
one Puritan show, okay. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where Puritanism exists now. I know that in the US, in New York, which is a very Puritan city, actually, a very Protestant city, I had to do a private performance to get agreement from a body that I could wear just a thong.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and in China, I couldn't wear the thong. I have a letter from some cultural sub-office saying that I had to wear a leopard print swimming trunks. Anyway, which is very interesting in terms of...
Well, we played in Nice, and 50 kids from... I don't know if it was a Catholic school or not, but they didn't come because they knew there was going to be...
Male nudity.
Yeah.
I mean, it's male nudity in the quest for laughs.
Yeah,
That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's like absurd. A middle-aged man wearing a leopard print thong is fundamentally should be a funny thing. I don't think it's sexualized at all.
Not
I mean,
at all.
watching the show last night,
No,
it's not a sexualized thing. It's a
no.
comedic thing. He shows his arse, and maybe it's quite an English thing. To show your arse is a funny thing. You know.
Yeah. But you were talking about modern art, art, visual art, and your plays are, as you say, the first plays are really based on visual contemporary art.
Yeah, they kind of worked them way out. It worked its way out in Adler and Gibb.
Yeah.
Adler and Gibb I created two artists, Janet Adler and Margaret Gibb, but they don't exist, but they have a body of work, they have biographies. There is a website, adlerandgibb.com.
Do they have their Instagram?
They don't have Instagram. No, they would never do Instagram because they rejected all that.
Yeah.
But the homepage of adlerandgibb.com is just Adler and Gibb do not exist. And you click on that sentence and it will go into some stuff. So I think I reached the zenith of that exploration. But at my arm, the first thing, the way the story leads is that his arm is bought. His arm is bought by an American dealer to be displayed in a gallery after his death. So he becomes an art object. And it was working through problems with the commodification in a way of art. England, the gallery piece, was written for a gallery, and that's absolutely about the value of Western art versus the value of life. Because someone is killed to support the life of a Westerner, and a gift is given to the widow of that person. A work of art is given, a work of art from England, hence the title England. So I have issues around the ethics of that stuff and how we lose an innate value of art as soon as we put a price tag on it.
Amir Reza Koestani, who sometimes does his plays here, made a version of England.
Oh, really?
You've not seen it?
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I know about it, yes.
In his country, yeah.
But there are lots of parallels with visual art, and I will sometimes, if I'm pushed, suggest that my work is conceptual, that is conceptual art, but then I would then be pushed even further. I would say that all theatre is a conceptual art.
Conceptual art with a good story.
Yeah, well, with a good story, completely, but then narrative, but then storytelling. Yeah. Okay. I mean, as someone standing on stage and telling you a story, if that's not conceptual art, I don't know what is. Because nothing is presented, nothing is materialized, but the image, the transformation is profound, and it happens conceptually.
And what you see is not what you understand.
Yes.
And that's really great. Yeah, yeah. Probably one last question.
Go on then.
Some artists, like, I don't know if you've heard about Donna Haraway.
No.
No, she's a writer and biologist, and she wrote some essays, and she published all the essays saying, well, I don't agree with some of the essays I've written now, but I'm publishing them because it's good that you see the whole story.
Yeah.
And I sometimes think, do authors who write a lot of plays think, some of the plays, if I had to write them today, I wouldn't write them differently, or I would not write them. Is there something like that, or is that?
Oh, very good. Do I have any regrets?
I don't know if it's regrets,
No, I know,
but you know, you're not the same person who's written My Arm, or probably you are.
No, I see the work. I mean, I was there when the work was written. I was different.
Hope you were.
Yeah, I was there. I know the space in which it was written. I don't mean physical, but the sort of mental space it was written in. And in the same way that I can't wish that space to be different in my life, I don't wish the work to be different, because it was honouring the space that I was in when I wrote it. I have returned often. I mean, I often say with My Arm, it's like the beginning of, and I still go back to, My Arm is so simple, but actually there are so many statements in My Arm that statements of sort of ontology in a way, of being in stage and in life in a way, that I go back to My Arm. I think Adler and Gibb, which was 11 years after My Arm, is just a much bigger working of the same idea in a way. And that's why I think I got it out of my system with Adler and Gibb. I think the interest would be for someone to read chronologically, because you would see, oh, well, that's where that idea comes from, and then that's where you can see the germination of the next piece in the previous piece in a way.
Yeah, that's what, okay.
Yeah. So how can I then question, because it's a continuum, and the idea of chopping a bit of the continuum off doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. What I would like to say also is that you say that, your writing is conceptual, but it's a good story, like we're saying at the same time, and it's very important, but to know that, it is conceptual, but you're also, because you're celebrating the fact of being together with an audience, it's also, it's not like only in the mind, it's like you manage for the thinking and the feeling to be there at the same time. It's a real experience, and you have a lot of humor too.
I hope so. I mean,
we laugh during these plays that sound sometimes, when you talk about only the form, that could sound conceptual, but it's just...
It shouldn't be. And also the idea that some people go, well, why isn't it on the radio? You know, but there is a profound visual element, even if the author, where there is no physical action, the visual strength of sitting and seeing another audience, another bank of audience seeing you and you seeing them. It's like it feels that thing I said about the eye and the ear. There is a lot for the eye to digest, and there is a lot for the eye to sort of play off against the ear. That even if an empty stage, that's still a strong statement, visual statement.
And it's something that you can't film in your plays, because it's each evening it's different, and it's in this sort of ambiance and feeling in between the people and what's going on stage.
I always kind of feel bad that there are clips on the internet of my work, because it's like, don't watch that.
It's not what happens.
No, the last piece, Terrestrial Salvation, you know, this is the apotheosis of so many ideas in a way, because this is an illustrated play with an audience sitting in a circle, everyone with a book. A lot of the initial storytelling and subsequent storytelling is done through illustrations and in a sort of graphic novel sort of way. The audience read. There is a absolute sort of physical sense of presence in the audience. They see pictures of themselves in the book. I mean, I don't know how you would capture that filmically.
You can't.
It would be a waste of film if film was used.
I find it difficult to film Malvolio, sorry, because as it's different each time, and you'd have to have cameras all over the place filming everybody at the same time.
I once got into a conversation with the people who wanted to film an oak tree, and it's like the press night of an oak tree. If you see one show, this one show is now representative of 350 different shows with 350 different actors.
It's not possible.
Not possible. And but profoundly theatre because of its impossibility, I think.
And that's nice to know that exists and that you can't film it.
Yeah, fact, you know, and we are transient things. We live and we die, and who cares if we don't exist beyond our deaths? It's really not important. It's not. It shouldn't be important.
Yeah. So there.
There we go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank
Great.
you. Bye.